Welcome to episode 27 of the Hipsters United podcast. My name is Chris, and I'm joined this week by Jill.
Hello, Chris.
So last week, Jason and I did the podcast by ourselves since you were out of town, and we were the only ones that had seen the band on the 20th anniversary tour, but this week Jason's unavailable. But you've now seen 3 different shows on 3 consecutive nights, one being the Black Sunshine White Crosses pairing in New York, and then you saw the one-off show in Atlantic City last night. But let's start off with the 48-song pairing of Black Sunshine and White Crosses, since we didn't talk about those last week. Night 1, Black Sunshine, very similar set list as last August, but let's go beyond the set list. You didn't see the band in August, so from your perspective, how was the band? How was the crowd? How are you?
Oh, man. You know, I was telling a couple of people earlier that, and I had mentioned it on the blog, that I was in San Francisco all of last week for a work conference that coincidentally was kind of hilarious because the big, concert event of the work conference was the Foo Fighters. So my week kicked off early on Monday with Foo Fighters playing a corporate gig in which Dave Grohl actually did say, "You guys rock your industry," which was maybe the funniest thing I've ever heard at a concert before. It was a little nauseating, but they played a really good show. So I kind of ended my trip early and took a red eye back to see the Black Crosses show on Thursday, and was totally wiped out for that. And as a result, had kind of gotten sick on my way back. But all in all, that first show, coming back for it, I'm so glad I did because it was amazing. That perhaps with Set the Controls, because I'm still not sure how I feel about that song. But barring that, we had a really great time. The venue, for those of you that don't know or didn't go to the show here, the venue is a really non-traditional venue for New York City that they played at. It's called the United Palace, and maybe it's not non-traditional, but it's an old gospel church that's way up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, in an area called Washington Heights. That's not really, the demographic there is not really that interested in the Smashing Pumpkins, let's just put it that way. So you kind of have to go. The only time I've ever gone to see a show up there has been for Arcade Fire. And so it's like, a mass exodus of hipsters that go all the way up into this very strange neighborhood, which they would never otherwise visit. It was kind of the same thing for the Pumpkins, because it was sort of, it's in a strange area, but it's obvious that everyone is there for the Pumpkins. Going into the concert, the crowd seemed really excited. I think there were really high expectations. And even later during the show, Billy made comments like, "We're finally back in New York," and people just went nuts. They were really excited that the Pumpkins had come back to the Big Apple. I had mentioned in my live blog, that was the night that I technologied myself out. That I was live blogging the show myself, and I had a press pass, and I was posting, photos to my Flickr, really crappy photos, but nonetheless.
So when you say you had a press pass, what does that mean? Did you get a front row seat? Did you get to interview the band afterwards?
No, I didn't get to interview the band or anything. I went straight home because I'd been sick, but basically, as part of the media, SmashingPumpkins.com hooked me up with the tour manager, who gave me basically a media pass, which means that I could shoot photography from in front of the first row for the first 3 songs. That's a standard issue disclaimer that they have all media sign. So basically, I was there. I got there early. I met up with their local publicity agent. I think they just contract through some company here. And I met her and then met all these other press agents. So I was a little bit, my boyfriend was taping the show, so he went ahead and went on inside to get set up. But I was a little intimidated before the show because the New York Times was there, the New York Post, New York Magazine. There were a bunch of really big publications there that had, tens of thousands of dollars of equipment. And I'm like, I'm a hobbyist photographer. Hi. Here's my Nikon. These guys they were really nice though. And it was kind of nice to meet them. Actually, the second day, more of the blog style folks came out. So like Brooklyn Vegan was there the second day. Not the big, huge press folks. But that first day, I went and I was pretty nervous because of the company I was in and the fact that I'd really, I've only taken photos at concerts a handful of times. So, and this just felt like it was kind of, I cared about what I was doing. So, the first three songs, basically what happened was the publicity agent took us in with all of our equipment past the security folks, and we went down to get set up in front of the first row. And what was really strange about this concert, and I think kind of impacted the way people felt about the concert, they'd set up the stage with like the first row of performers, so, Ginger, Billy, and Jeff. That first row of the first row of equipment was like 30 feet back or 20 feet back from the lip of the stage. So they were like situated quite far back from the audience. As opposed to Atlantic City, which, there was a barrier and they were right there.
Right, Columbus was the same way.
Right, so it was a little difficult to take photos those first two nights because they had been pushed back so far. And I think that has to do with the fact that it's an old church. It's not necessarily engineered for like massive security or whatever. So, the first three songs were a blur. I really enjoyed, it was a really surreal experience too, because Billy came out with that ridiculous headdress on, and it was just like, what am I doing here? Like the costumes were crazy, and he had this really entranced look on his face, obviously trying to just set this hilarious stage. Jimmy's Rocktopus started off the show, and he was fantastic. He got a really big round of applause from the audience. But, that show overall, my pictures turned out great. I think SP.com has already posted a handful of them, but I know that Paul said that he was going to be doing a bigger feature on the photography as I get him the photos from the last couple of nights. But that show blew me away. Like you said, Chris, I hadn't seen the band for over a year. I saw them, or right at a year. I saw them last year in Atlanta on my happy coincidence of a work trip. And they have tightened up those songs. They have, I think, didn't Zach post an MP3 of Tarantula from that first night to the blog? Right. Yeah, we've had a couple of new posters to the blog this week. It's kind of exciting, including Eric. So, like I said, he posted that MP3 of Tarantula, and that was the point at which I just realized how tight they are. They have been playing this set list, and it is really enjoyable because they've been playing it for quite a long time. I found that songs like Tarantula, songs like United States, Super Christ, they were really, really well executed. I hadn't seen them that well executed before, and it made quite an impression on me. I'm in the tank for the band, as Jason likes to say. So it's not that difficult for me to say this, but I thought the show was great. I thought the low points in the show for me, maybe, I was a little on the fence about the beginning as the end is the beginning. It was weird. It was, I heard quite a few comments after the show about, hey, is that song from that movie trailer that we saw? That was really cool. But from my perspective, I was like, whoa, this is just kind of out of left field. And it was really down-tempo and sort of bizarro.
So is it the same version they played in August? Did you watch any of the YouTube videos from the August tour?
More or less it is. I think it's slowed down even further.
Billy kind of prowls around the stage.
Hmm. It's but I was a little bit on the fence about that. But one of the things that it's not like I've never realized this before, but the end of Transformer was basically this like jazz rendition. So the horns were able to kind of solo. I thought that the new musicians really added a lot to the mix. I thought that they added a lot of color. I thought that they added a lot of interest. On songs like Tonight Tonight, they just sounded fantastic.
So did they play for the whole show? Were they on there for the entire set?
Not the whole set, but they were on pretty consistently for quite a while, a lot more than they were last night. So I think that first night they were able to play on quite a bit. But, the end of Transformer just sort of digressed into this really cool jazzy rendition, and then it went into Super Christ. And, Jason and I were talking last night when we went to dinner before the show that we think that, or it appears as though Jimmy has a lot more say in kind of the jazzy nature of some of these songs. We were kind of wondering, like, do you think that he has a lot more songwriting input these days because he has these songs where he's just showcased?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, Super Christ is obviously a huge showcase for him. Rocktopus, obviously. But some of these more jazzy renditions or less structured songs, even though they have structure, they have a lot of leeway for him to perform like that. And I felt like the end of Transformer and in a few other spots, especially on the more longer, the longer epic songs like Set the Controls, they had a lot of room to play around with that. So I thought that was kind of the highlight of the show for me. Not the highlight, but definitely a highlight. I thought the encore was interesting, to say the least. As far as I think that's an interesting time to talk about the fan response. I thought that, so from where I was sitting in the 9th row, just on Jeff's side. So thank you to their tour manager for hooking up with nice seats. Around me, the fans were really responsive, and they seemed like they were having a good time. I know that there was some booing during Set the Controls. I also, I didn't hear it very well because it was so loud. I'm really glad that we wore earplugs the whole time. I was very happy for that. I think they were starting to lose people, as it's been frequently commented before. And I thought that they would come back and play, I knew what they were going to play for the encore because of what we'd learned in Toronto. But it's a really strange way to end the concert. It's like, here's this really spacey, bizarro, drawn-out, Pink Floyd song. And then you come out and play this weird, We Only Come Out at Night, which is cute and kitschy, and the kazoos and the bird calls and that stuff. Sure, it's cute. And then Billy extended his banter for Everything is Beautiful at the very end of the show. Like, he stopped the set and was, I think I'm remembering this correctly. If someone can comment if I'm totally forgetting this or attributing it to some other show. But he stopped the banter, or he stopped the band altogether that first night, and said, we love you. It just like went on and on and on, and then they went back to finish the song, and then it was like, okay, it's over. Lights up. It was really strange. Like, I have come to expect this from the band, but it felt like there were definitely, 3 different movements to this concert, and people were confused about the last one, for sure.
I remember having the same reaction, because I saw pretty much the same set in August, and I remember having the same reaction at the end, where they did set the controls, and people didn't boo, obviously, back in August, which was I don't know how I would have felt with people booing around me. That I probably would have been pretty uncomfortable by that. I mean, it's one thing to. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Set the Controls. Far from it. I dislike it very much, but I don't know. Like the booing seems very rude to me.
Mm.
But after
Well,
that, and then the encore comes in. They in August they did We Only Come Out at Night, and then in the summertime again with the kazoos and the it was
right.
very cute. And then I turn to my girlfriend Eileen and I say, "There's no way they end the show like that. They're going to end with something long and like Silver Fuck or something like that." But nope, lights on. That's the end. And I
Yep.
just remember like, what?
It's a little, it's a little jarring, I feel like.
Yeah.
And truthfully, it was a little, it wasn't disappointing to me because I'm there just to enjoy what they've performed. But, I think it's interesting that you mentioned where you are, people wouldn't boo. Okay, this is New York, and they're very vocal about things. People tell you how they feel about things. And I think overall, I actually commented to Zach on my way out, I thought people were extremely patient. For me, I hadn't seen a lot of these songs in a long time. The second night, I had hardly seen any of the songs before. And I run a blog for the Smashing Pumpkins. It's a weird experience to come away with a totally new experience of their stuff, even though I've seen them dozens of times before.
Right.
So the reason that I feel like this first night was most enjoyable for me was because they just commit to the songs that they play, and they have worked them up so tightly and can be flexible with them that they can just jam, and it's so obvious that they're having a fun time. And it's been a recurring theme the last week on the blog where people are saying, "Oh, the set lists look amazing," and "Oh, it's totally unfair that you get this set list when I got this set list," and la-di-da, whatever. But looking at the set list is totally different from experiencing the concerts. And this particular show was executed so marvelously with that weird caveat of the end that didn't quite settle right with me, that it's really difficult for me to say this was, that the next night's show was better than this one. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you said the end was kind of the weird part and didn't settle right. I'm wondering, Jason mentioned, I don't know if he mentioned it on the show or if he just mentioned it to me after the Columbus show last week, that he thought that the crowd would have been gone home happier maybe if they still played the same set but just like ended the show with Cherub Rock or something like that.
Right.
Like, do you agree there? Like, is it just a matter of, the just shift like today or something to the end of the show? Would that have made a difference with the crowd?
I think yes. Part of what attracts me to the Smashing Pumpkins is their ability and willingness to experiment. I'm not interested in going to a show where I know exactly what's going to happen. I've seen Weezer a few times, okay? They play the album version straight through, for the entire concert. And I know that's not what I'm going to get when I see the Pumpkins. They're constantly reworking their songs, they're constantly experimenting, and they're constantly challenging their audience's perspective of music in general. Would I ever see Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun from any other band? I don't think so. But at the same time, that doesn't mesh with people's expectations of laying down $80+ for a concert ticket. And keep in mind, that's what the prices were for the New York shows. We didn't make a big deal about the prices this, tour around because we knew that they were going to be higher. But face value before Ticketmaster fees and taxes was like $80 this time for the New York shows. So if people bought two nights of shows, they were shelling out $200. So I think it's perfectly acceptable to come away with, and I think also New York audiences are willing to sit through more experimental stuff because they have more exposure. to things, perhaps. I know that's huge.
Oh, that's East Coast bias.
Yeah, exactly. We're totally liberal media elites out here, but expectation that you're going to get something a little weird when you go out sometimes here in New York. I've definitely seen several shows that I was like, huh? When I left. But my point is, I think people were quite patient with the experimentalization that they did see, but it's almost like they needed to be rewarded for their good behavior at the end with like Today or Cherub Rock or, something that they recognize. Billy's not one to pander, so I don't think it's fair for us to expect that he would do something like that. But I think that it would have done a lot in terms of good graces with the audience, which is kind of funny because the next night, I don't know if you'd seen this, Chris, but the next night, some guy from the audience actually got up on stage and yelled at Billy.
Yeah, I heard about that.
It was one of the weirdest. It was, again, one of the weirdest experiences I've had at a concert, because this guy had been heckling, and I didn't know if it was staged or not, because I was in Philly last year when one of the guys from the wrestling, I forget which wrestling league, TNA, is it TNA, that came up on stage. I was at the show when they actually did do a staged version of this. But I think that it's legit, that this guy was just, an angry fan who was drunk and belligerent and was yelling from, fairly close to the stage, and Billy could hear him. And so he brought him up on the stage and he was like, "Do you have something you want to say to me?" And he was like, "Yeah, last night's show sucked." and Billy was like, "What?"
But obviously not enough for the guy to not come back the next day.
Right. And so Billy was like, "What, do you want your money back?" And he asked, "What sucked about it?" "The set list sucked, man. Heavy Metal Machine, man. I mean, that sucked." Like, he of course didn't say anything very coherent.
Right.
But he was, it was kind of interesting to see Billy let someone come up on stage and give him a microphone to tell him this. Of course, he sort of retaliated with some typical tongue-in-cheek sarcasm. What did he say? It was like, "Yeah, I really like, hey man, I really like that song that you did. That one." It was big in Europe. It was a pretty funny exchange. But I think that was kind of indicative of how people reacted to that first night. Was, everything was all fine and dandy all the way through probably Heavy Metal Machine into Glasses Theme, and then those last three songs were just like, what? So, I still think it was a great concert. I think they were better than I've seen them play. I miss some of the old Zeitgeist songs. Is that kind of strange? I guess I fall into a weird category of fan. I miss seeing stuff like Bring the Light, but I got to see it enough that I probably shouldn't count my chickens or whatever that saying is. But moving on to the next night.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's move along to White Crosses.
Right. So people were going crazy for the set list online, right?
Yep, I can tell you that. I was online, I was following the set list, and I managed to temper my enthusiasm since as I'm reading the updates, and actually we only got, as the show is going on, I think we only got 1979, Bodies, Landslide. Like, it was just, there was a when they did this in Toronto, at least, we had our man on the street inside the show, but he did not have Wi-Fi access, so he couldn't give us the running blog. So we got the show, the pictures posted on the SmashingPumpkins.com Flickr feed, and I think those were the ones that were leaked. And man, everybody was going nuts online. But I managed to control myself, even though I was pretty excited by what I was reading. So what did you think actually seeing them? Everyone online, I mean, the consensus during and after the show was, oh, this show must have been better. The set list was superior. Definitely, I'm pissed that I didn't go to this one and that I had to see the Cleveland show or see night one. But you've already said you like night one the best, so what did
Yeah,
you
not to
think?
spoil it or anything. I So for this show, we sat in the very first row of the balcony on the same side of the stage as, on Jeff's side. Great for taping. But the balcony sat down almost the entire show. Like
Wow.
the energy was not. I think that there was high energy for some of the set, but it was apparent that this is really only the second time that the band had been performing some of these songs. So regardless of whether or not, Bodies is on the set list, yeah, when I saw Eric had posted that about the Toronto show, I was pretty excited. But in actual execution, I would totally rather see Super Christ right now than Bodies, because they have a long way to go on the song to kind of convert it over into the new SP2 format, where it's even more in your face. I think Jimmy has grown so much as a drummer in the last, I don't know, 12 years since the song was released, that it really kind of, they rework those songs so consistently over the course of the tour that by the end of it, they're phenomenal. And seeing them at the very beginning of the tour, yeah, I have a lot of admiration for them for trotting out these old songs, but their level of execution is just not that high yet. And, I was thinking about this today. It's probably intentional that the Chicago shows are later in the tour, because they will have reworked a lot of these songs for their, grand homecoming or whatever.
Right, I'll be curious to hear if and I think that your opinion of night one being better than night two, I think I actually read that from a few people that actually went to the show. Obviously, not the people following along at home on their computers, but a lot of the people who were at the shows, I think, agreed with you. And I'd be curious to see once they go to Chicago or some of the later shows in the tour if they've brought the second day up to par with the first day in the crowd's eyes.
Right. There are certain elements of the second show that were interesting to me. I mean, besides the songs that they chose to play, it felt like a lot of those older songs that have, kind of been in the vault for a while, so to speak. It felt just kind of like they were running through them. Like they were kind of rushed. I think Eric said this about Toronto too. It felt like they were kind of rushed. It felt like they were just sort of getting through them as opposed to just really wailing on them. I remember seeing Bodies in '96, and I just remember how hard and heavy and just, it was pretty mind-blowing back then. I was not as impressed by it that second night. It's fun to listen to these old songs, but I'm also finding out about myself that I kind of am really partial to the new stuff. I really like to see where they're going with new stuff. And to a certain degree, it's fun to hear the old stuff because they have taken a new spin on it, and they're trying to recreate it for the current times, and for their current talents. And, I don't think anyone would argue that Billy Corgan or any of the, musicians are the same musicians they were 12 years ago. They've grown, and they've had a lot more influences that have come across their way. So that's kind of my main beef with the second night, is that, yeah, we got a lot of really old, maybe rare songs, but the execution is just not as powerful as it is for the first night. Now, that being said, there were some really insane highlights, I thought, of that second show. And this is exactly like how I felt about the first show, is that the highlights were amazing, and the sort of lowlights were really weird. Like, if they could figure out how to put all the highlights on one side and, figure out how to improve those lowlights, yeah, it'd be great. But I thought Ava Adora was fantastic. The way they reworked that made it a great opener. As Rome Burns blows my mind. I commented to Jason, I was like, how is it possible that 10 years ago, would I have ever imagined that I would have liked music this heavy? Like, I went through a pretty emo stage in college at one point, and it's like, as Rome Burns is the antithesis of that. I thought it was fantastic. The Sounds of Silence was weird. That definitely, I don't know how to interact with that yet.
Yeah.
it's really heavy and it loses people. I think I told Jason there were some delicate girls in the audience that started to leave at that point. Um, they were not enthused, I don't think. Landslide was really tender. A great job on that. They just nail the guitar solos together there, or the duet, I guess. I thought Galapagos was really nice. Again, it has a ways to go, but I thought it was a really nice addition to the set list. And you read about it on the live blog, but there's this really interesting element of almost world music that they've sort of implemented into the set list with the addition of the new musicians. And Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness was, case in point of where that lilting melody from the double violin is just a really interesting experiment of sound. It's tuned a little weirdly. I'd never listened to a double violin before, so the tuning on it is really almost haunting. And the way that they bring on the other horns and everything, it was a really beautiful experiment almost. And it took me a while to figure out what was going on at that point. But then later, they also brought all of the percussion instruments on, and people were getting up and shaking it. I was impressed. I was like, people are dancing at the Smashing Pumpkins concert like it was at a Cuban nightclub, like when they just played As Rome Burns, and like 2 songs before that they just played Galapagos. If anything, it's a huge testament to the huge range of styles this band can play. And I think, Jason and I were talking about this last night, we really haven't seen a lot of press about this. Like, I don't know if people are just not aware of it, or it's done so in an integrated way that it's not apparent. I don't know. But any band that can play, really, really heartfelt, soft songs like Landslide or Galapagos, and turn around 2 songs later and play As Rome Burns, and then turn around a few songs later and play I Am 1 Part 2 for the encore.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So when I think of I Am
so
1 Part 2, I think of, like the repetitive guitar strumming, and like the sun, I am one, and it kind of like goes on, and it's like almost like a train at the end where it's just kind of like joo 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 with the guitar.
Uh-huh.
Is that what it sounded like at the show, or did it sound completely different with I Am 1 Part 2 lyrics?
It's spacey. It is a little bit droney. I enjoyed it last night even more than I did the night before, because it took me a while to realize what was going on that second night. I knew to expect I Am 1 Part 2, but it was really difficult to hear the lyrics, and I'm not sure that I would have been able to pick it out of a hat had I been the one to hear it first. I would have been like, what is this song? So it was quite different, and I thought that it was done really well. But again, it's that closing song that really maybe loses people, because they're maybe expecting to hear something that they recognize, or something that perhaps is a big single, or something that's rockin'.
Well, how long does it go on? So the original I Am 1 Part 2 was, I can't reach my CD collection. I think it's somewhere around 6 or 7 minutes. It's already a pretty long song just in the studio. How long was it when they played it at the show?
It's probably 10, 12 minutes long.
So it's not Set the Controls.
No, it's not quite Set the Controls, but it has that same kind of vibe to it, I think. That is not super crowd engaging. It's just experimental. But I just don't know what to think of it, because they come out and play this really tender That's the Way My Love Is on acoustic guitar, and everybody's at the front of the stage, with their like little hand percussion. And it's lovely, and the crowd is really into it, and then they go get their electric guitars, and they play this really shoegazy noise experimental, I Am One Part Two. And, at some point behind me during this show, during this song, I heard this guy behind me say, "Man, I wish they'd play more old stuff to close out the show." And I just wanted to be like, do you even realize? So I think that probably summed up the feelings of a lot of the people there. It was pretty funny. But, I thought the real highlight of the show was, at least for me, was seeing Gossamer again. I love that song. Not gonna lie.
So this version, I guess, was a lot shorter than the versions they
Yeah.
played last year. So did it sound better, do you think? I think Jason mentioned to me in an instant message conversation, I forget if he said it on the show last week, but he mentioned that he thought that they took off just enough where it still retained all of the awesomeness of Gossamer.
Yeah. It was, I described it to Jason last night as transcendent.
That good,
Not
huh?
translucent, but transcendent. Um, I think, I think that Gossamer, they've been practicing it, obviously, because it just sounds fantastic. It's a lot shorter. It's probably in the 10 to 15 minute range as opposed to the 25 to 30-minute range.
Right.
Um, and I'll be honest, when I saw it in Asheville, because I went to 6 of the Asheville shows, when I saw it in Asheville, it was always at the end of the set, and so it kind of started grating on my nerves at the end, like towards the end of that run of shows, because you're already standing on your feet for 25 or for 2.5 hours. Now you're going to ask me to like indulge you in this 30-minute opus. It's like it's tiring, and I can't imagine it from the band's perspective because they've got to be exhausted too. But they have shaved off enough of the song that it retains its sort of character, and I think it's even gotten better. I just felt like it was people were really into it last night. The people around that night in New York, I don't know how many people knew the song. It was hard to tell, like I said, because we were in the balcony and there was not a lot of energy in the balcony.
Right.
But I thought it was fantastic. And again, this is another indication of how I feel like the band's heart is into this new music. And it's more fun to me to see someone play something and really enjoy it than play something for the sake of just playing something. I hope I'm conveying that right, because I think, I'm not one to complain about them playing old stuff because, I'm as sentimental as the next person. But as far as for my money and for my, concert enjoyment, it's really fun to see them have a good time on stage. And, all of the new musicians are into these new songs because they've kind of helped shape the way that they sound. So they have this sense of ownership that's conflicting with what Billy has called this, or I think it was Billy, or maybe it was Jimmy in the interview with Matt Pinfield. The band's sense of ownership of the songs conflicts with the fans' sense of ownership of the old stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's a little wacky. But people feel like they have this historical sense of, and Billy even made a joke about this on the second night. He was like, why don't you play that song? He said that people had asked him, why don't you play that song that, we lost my virginity to? There's a sense of very, personal interaction with their old stuff.
Maybe that was I Am One Part Two for some people.
A very limited number of people, perhaps. But there's a sense of people really love those old songs for what it represents to them in their own personal life. The band, they've worked through all of these new songs to the point where they own the sort of ongoing transformation and development of these songs, and it's clear that it's more fun for them to play them. And, I think that'll happen naturally with the new old stuff, whatever, as they continue to play it on tour. But it's sort of an inherent conflict between what the audience wants to hear and what the band wants to play.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing these both these sets when they make it to livesmashingpumpkins.com. For those of you out there who didn't see the message on sp.com, the first show is finally up on livesmashingpumpkins.com, the Columbus Halloween show, and I haven't purchased or downloaded it, but I did listen to, like, it lets you go on there and listen to 30-second clips of the beginning of the songs. I listened to the clip of A Song for a Son, and it just, the sound quality is just incredible. Obviously, it's a soundboard version, but it sounded better than it did being in the audience. Like, you can actually hear the keyboard and the accompanying instruments, which, being in the audience, it was very hard to hear. Like I mentioned this last week, but it seemed like a lot of the times it was drums and bass, and that's all you could hear at some point. So I'm really looking forward to hearing these two Black Sunshine and White Crosses sets, to hear kind of all of the musicians, kind of how they add to the songs. What did you think of the new songs they played on the second night? So they played Owutta, they played A Song for a Son, and As Rome Burns, you already talked about, the March Hare.
I thought, so the March Hare is the one that went into the crazy percussion, isn't it? I think so.
I think so. I haven't heard it yet, but that's what I've heard. I've read people talking about it.
I'm pretty sure that that's the one that goes into the crazy percussion, which was really fun. Owutta, Oh What a Beautiful Night, really lovely. I think stylistically it went into the set list at a perfect point, because you have this, Cupid de Lock, 1979, 99 Floors, Oh Whata, and then Sunkissed. And it's just this lovely sort of, it's why I got into the band in the first place. Because it feels like that same grandiose, heartfelt, nostalgic sensibility. And I thought it was really lovely. I can't remember a whole lot about it, because I was kind of getting back to my seat from taking pictures. But it was lovely what I heard. I liked Sunkissed a lot too. I mean, I know it's not a new song, but it's the first time I've heard it played, and really it's a fairly new addition to the set list, to any set list, I guess. A Song for a Son sounds like a quintessential rock song from like the mid-90s. I think Jason said it best to me one time when he said, "How could this song not have been written already?" Like, it's kind of an instant classic. It's rockin', and people in Atlantic City last night really liked it. Again, the energy was not great on that second night in New York, so I didn't get a really great sense for how people thought about it that night. But I thought it was great. The March Hare, I think my opinion of the March Hare was a little overshadowed by what followed it, which was Age of Innocence. And Age of Innocence has been completely reworked. Like, almost unrecognizable if not for the lyrics. And
in a good or bad way?
Well, I mentioned on the blog that I didn't really like it. I think it's another one of these situations where they need to kind of work through what they want to do with it and play it for a while on tour before I really make a judgment call. But it's been given the like heavy treatment. And part of why I love Age of Innocence on the record is that it has that sort of, nostalgic, happy-go-lucky.
Yeah, it's very poppy.
Yeah, it's poppy, and it's not like that at all in the live version for this tour. So it'll be interesting to see how much different it gets from now until the end of the tour. So it was a little hard to sit through because I love that song a lot. But yeah, I mean, the new songs, I think the newly written songs, were executed better than the new old songs. If that makes sense. This is getting way too confusing for me.
Yeah.
So, but overall, I definitely enjoyed the show. If anything, I heard several comments after the show, both nights, that they thought Billy Corgan was a really great performer or entertainer.
Well, that's good.
And it was a big mix of people, young and old. So, and I joked to Jason last night, I had never seen so many multicultural Smashing Pumpkins fans as I have in New York. Growing up in the Midwest where there's not a whole lot of that. There were a lot of different types of people at the show in New York, so...
Well, finally, you saw a one-off show in Atlantic City last night that had a different set list from the one-off show in Cleveland. How well did this one go over? And did you think the mixture of songs from both shows, like how did the two shows mix together for you?
It was really cool. Last night's set list, I wish I would have been standing somewhere different. This is kind of a weird story, but Jason got punched last night at the show.
Wow.
Not even joking.
No wonder he's not on the podcast tonight.
The audience was pretty disrespectful last night, at least in parts. I think it was like it's kind of that Jersey Shore that you hear about in like fables or something, or like Bruce Springsteen novellas. I don't really know. The actual audience was not great for last night's show. But I think the band did a really good job. I think that the set list was a really great mixture of both of the shows, and I think a lot of people had been concerned about whether or not, it would be a complete reiteration of Cleveland or whatever. But I think that they're probably using these one-off shows to practice songs that they want to practice, in order to tighten up their two-night show sets.
Yeah, it almost seems like in some parts that they just swapped out some songs that they needed to practice or wanted to work on more. Like they swapped out Mayonnaise with Soma, and
Right.
they swapped out Again, and the Rose March with 99 Floors, Oh Whata, and Sunkissed. It's like
Right.
they figured they needed to work on those more, maybe.
I think Siva was on the August tour, wasn't it?
Yep.
So I thought Siva was performed even better last night than it was the night before. It was a great performance of that. Soma definitely needs to keep getting practiced because there's so much, and I think that that Corgan had been talking about. Well, he gave that interview. Was it an interview where he talked about? Or no, it's in the documentary, I think, that he talks about how he was reticent to play some of these older songs like Mayonnaise and Soma because of the historical sort of connotations with them. I believe that's where it is. I know I've read that.
I read that in it was one of the reviews on SmashingPumpkins.com,
Right.
I think.
Right. I haven't seen the documentary yet because of the shows, but I can definitely see why, because I think that the crowd goes crazy for those songs. And I think there's a higher bar that's set around these crowd favorites. So I think that they want to practice the song more. I enjoyed it a lot last night, but again, it doesn't have the polish that some of the other songs do. I was really cool last night. I hadn't seen that. I mean, I saw it in New York, but I thought it was really, really well done last night. And they did throw in, well, this was actually pretty funny, for the Sounds of Silence. Well, was it for the Sounds of Silence? No. They played a Springsteen tease. That was for Heavy Metal Machine. So Billy screwed up, and it was right before Ginger was supposed to sing the Rush tease.
Right.
And Billy screwed up. The whole band, he pointed to Jimmy and said, "Stop," in the middle of the show. So the band completely came to a halt. Everyone was laughing on stage. The crowd was like, what? What was going on? So Jimmy, started it back up. They ended Heavy Metal Machine, went into Rush, and then Billy sang, Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen. And it was not like a normal Born in the USA. It was a modulated Born in the USA, so every, repetition of the chorus went up, a half step in the key change. So It was this really weird, and Jason and I were, in a bizarro moment. We looked at each other because there was a point at the end of the song where he was just trying to get the audience to chant USA. I was just like, what is this? This is so strange. But it went off pretty well. And we actually got another treat. They played Nowhere Man by the Beatles.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so is that a Sounds of Silence cover, or is that a Landslide cover? Does it sound like the original, or is it absolutely nothing like it?
It's pretty true to the Beatles original. I mean, it's not as quirky. It's not hard. It's not, unrecognizable. Like, we knew exactly what it was.
There's no metal droning going on.
No, it was pretty straight. It was a nice addition to, it kind of broke up the set list a little bit. It was cool. We both looked at each other like, what's going on? How do we not know what they're playing? I think that the blog has negatively affected us for our enjoyment of the show. Focus Rose News, we have to report it now. So, yeah. But what more than anything, and this is where I feel like my interaction or my thoughts about the audience kind of reach a standstill. It was last night's show. Despite the fact that Jason got punched because there was an altercation with some fans that were really, really upset about them playing old stuff, or not playing old stuff. The crowd booed a lot last night. And that makes me upset because that just shows a lack of respect.
Yeah. So were there in what parts of the show did they boo? Was there any pattern, or were they just pissed in general?
I think the run of songs from, people couldn't boo over As Rome Burns or The Sounds of Silence because there's no way anyone would have heard them. It's just so loud. But that run of songs from A Song for a Son, people were disrespectful about that song. There were guys behind us screaming, "Don't play Pearl Jam!" I just wanted to turn around and laugh. And then they played Today, and then from Nowhere Man on through Landslide, people were booing during the acoustic set.
That really bugs me, and I that's probably why we didn't get a real acoustic set in Columbus. I guess Billy probably, and he said this before at acoustic shows, he really keeps telling the crowd to be quiet and things, that it really bothers him when people are talking or making noise while they're playing acoustically, but I don't know. That really bugs me.
And the thing, so, okay, I understand if you're going to be a jerk and boo through things and, you're just going to be a negative, drunk idiot. But what was so confusing to me was that whenever they played a song that anyone knew, it was like Pavlov had rung his bell and they were going crazy. Yada, 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 there's booing, and then they play Today, and people just start screaming and singing at the top of their lungs. And then there's this acoustic set, and people are being disrespectful, and I can't say this about everyone in the audience, because I think there was a big contingency that was really enjoying this. A lot of the older people I saw were really enjoying. A lot of older couples were there, like my age or older, maybe in their 30s or 40s, kind of enjoying the acoustic set and snuggling to it, if you will. Cool. That's what it's for. I mean, it's emotional for a reason. But then, when Landslide came on, when Disarm came on, when Bullet with Butterfly Wings came on, there were mosh pits, and people were going crazy. It was the weirdest experience ever, because people, I guess people didn't think that was in any way ironic. To be so angry about one thing and be so vocally, against it, and then in the same breath to just go apeshit. It was really, really strange, because I don't know, I look at going to a concert as an artistic experience. It's not like me that has the artistic power. I don't wield any sort of power. I'm just there to experience what the band wants to feed me. And this isn't Go for Just a Smashing Pumpkins. But these people were genuinely angry that they weren't getting to hear what they wanted to. But then when they got to hear what they wanted to, they just went crazy. So, I don't know. And we've been talking about this a lot on the blog lately, and, you and I were talking about this earlier, Chris, that I think the band is kind of sick of that. sure, go home and listen to your records already. Listen to your records at top volume and enjoy what you want. But why pay $100 for a ticket or for a pair of tickets to go see stuff when you know that they're going to be playing new stuff?
And I
I don't
wonder
know.
what the band can do about that. Like, I mean, is it just a matter of different advertising? I mean, they did advertise this as a 20th anniversary tour, and
Yeah,
while most of us, those of us who follow the band online, obviously read Billy's blog and knew not to expect, now we're going to play Today, now we're going to play Disarm, now we're going to play our, like, all the hits from Siamese Dream. Like, all of us who are hardcore fans kind of know the band and know not to expect that, but the majority of people at these shows aren't hardcore fans and think that they're going to see just another band. Like if the Foo Fighters came and said, "Oh, we're doing a I don't know how long the
corporate
Foo
rock
Fighters have
gig.
been around, a 10th, a 12th anniversary tour," you would
Right,
expect them to play all of their hits. Like if I were going to see them, I don't follow the Foo Fighters online, and I definitely wouldn't boo when they didn't, but that's what I would expect to see. So I almost
right.
think some of it the band brings upon themselves. Like
Yeah,
they Billy knew that this was going to happen, I think, before they even started, because in his blog post he said, "Now, we're calling this 20th anniversary, but I think that those of you who are worried that it's going to be a nostalgia act are going to think that, I mean, what did he say? We're pissing on our grave or something like that." Like he knew that
right.
there would be this kind of reaction. So I don't necessarily like feel that bad for him or the band. Like I feel bad that people are booing. I think that's disrespectful, and I think that no matter what they do, like that's not something that ever should happen. I think you reserve booing when someone's not trying. I've definitely been to concerts. I saw the band Unwritten Law when I lived in St. Louis,
Hmm.
and I think they were opening for another band, but they came out and the lead singer was totally drunk and stumbling around, like didn't know the words to his own songs, like clearly, didn't care. That's a
Right.
time when you can boo. Like, the guy clearly isn't trying. That's a case where you're definitely not getting your money's worth. But in a case with the Pumpkins where they work their asses off and you know that they really care about what they're doing and are really like putting their all into it, that's not a time to boo. Like if you don't like it,
Right.
like that's partially you that doesn't like it. Maybe you shouldn't go see them in the future.
Well, and Billy mentioned last night on stage, he said, it was between songs, he just said, we have the best fans in the world, and we also have the worst fans in the world. That's all he said, and they went right into a new song. I mean, it's got to frustrate them, and to some extent, I think that, this was their third show in a row. They were working their tails off, and it's disheartening to hear that from any group of people because if you are working really hard, you don't want people to criticize you for that. Or maybe not criticize you, but you want them to recognize how hard you're working for them. And I just feel like the crowd was really disrespectful. So it was difficult for me to see that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they also played some really great songs that I think a lot of the audience was into. Gossamer again last night was really awesome. I think a lot of the people that were booing were kind of perking up and hearing, huh, this is interesting. I saw some people kind of dancing near me that had been booing, and you know, it's interesting. And I remember thinking, kind of, I don't know, sardonically last night to myself. I was like, I can't hate all of these people that are old fans too much because their money is what's allowing the Pumpkins to go on tour at these larger venues, like, and do it, across the nation. Because that revenue is allowing me to see what I think is really cutting edge and experimental and what I like about the Pumpkins. These people hate it and they're really vocal about it, but it's still funding the tour. And that's a horrible way to think about it, but, their money pays for my experience. Maybe I shouldn't have said that on
Yeah.
the podcast.
And on the other hand, like the Pumpkins are taking chances, and I think
Yeah,
that when you do take chances, you have to be willing to accept the fact that sometimes your chances are going to fail. Like that they aren't going to go over as well as you thought, or people aren't going to get into it, or something about it just won't work. I think that I mean, I don't think they should expect people to boo them, but I think that, like, when you're talking about the lack of energy
Right.
during the second night of the White Crosses show, I think that when you are a band that takes chances, I think that you have to prepare yourself for that. So, I mean,
Right.
I think from all I've heard, Billy said that they're still, having a blast. They're having as much fun as they've had since 1996. So,
Yeah. No, it's evident that the band is having a lot of fun. I think that if anything, it's really nice to see all of the different musicians that they've brought on tour with them and how they get to showcase that. So, Ginger, the new double violinist or whatever she happens to be playing at the moment, she has some really fantastic solos that just are beautiful. Actually, one of the things that I realized, was it last night or the night before? I think it was the night before. Well, both last night and the night before. Sunkissed and Owada remind me a lot of Swan because of the violin add to it. So there's this sort of interesting, like, poppy quality to them. Now I'm going to confuse myself. But I think that, they have showcased Ginger's talents very well. They've showcased the new horn player's talents very well. Lisa and Chris Pooley both get really fantastic piano solos or organ solos at different points in the set. And of course, they showcase Jimmy and I think Jeff is taking a stronger role in some of the soloing or taking leads on solos or duetting with Billy, which is really fun to see because they vibe really, kind of look at each other with this hilarious sense of excitement. So, I think they're taking advantage of these touring musicians pretty well. So,
speaking of Chris Pooley, now we've seen him play the accordion back in August. We've seen him play the flute, and we've seen him play the organ.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's next? Is he gonna come out and take Billy's guitar away and start playing guitar solo?
It's actually funny because Jason and I talked about this a bit last night. All three of these guys, so Steven, Gabriel, and Chris Pooley, they're all touring musicians for No Doubt. So I made a joke to Jason last night. I was like, can you imagine what it would be like to have this historical career of like going on tour, playing backup vocals and instrumentation for, I'm Just a Girl in the World into like As Rome Burns. Their experience of like playing music as touring musicians has got to be just totally changed. It's crazy, and it seems like they're having a really good time too. That's kind of what I was not worried about, but I was interested to see how they interacted with the crowd and the fans and the rest of the band, and they seem to have a really good time. So I think they add a lot.
All right. Well, we have been going on extremely long here. We're already over an hour for this, real quick one-on-one podcast. But do you have anything else to add from the three nights? Are you going to see the band again? I think you're going to see them next Sunday. Is that right?
A Mohegan Sun, yeah.
Is that it for the rest of the tour?
As far as I'm concerned, yeah. It's exhausting. Yeah. It's exhausting going to see them because they put on such a great show. So I don't know. If anything, definitely don't hesitate to go check them out because if anything, you're getting just hard on their sleeve, great performance. Whether or not you like it is your own personal taste, and hopefully you just keep an open mind about it.
Yeah.
That's what I'd encourage all those booers to do.
Unfortunately, I don't think any of the booers will be listening to the podcast this week.
Doubtfully.
Well, next week, hopefully, we'll be back to our normal panel, and I know, Jill, you will be out since you'll be at the show, so I don't know, maybe we'll do the podcast a little bit later in the week. We'll see, but I wanted to have a discussion about if all goes wrong, assuming we all get a hold of it this week. We can all kind of talk about our impressions of that. I know I'm really looking forward to picking that up on Tuesday. So do you have a favorite song from the tour that you want me to include as our song of the week this week? Should I stick Gossamer on there?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Then our song of the week this week is Gossamer from November 7th, 2008 at the United Palace in New York City. And good night, everybody.
Go find you another son to kill. Go find you another son. Go find you another son. Go find you another son to run down. Go find another son. You don't want me anymore. You don't need me anymore. No more.
Hipsters United podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Smashing Pumpkins, Virgin Records, or Warner Brothers Reprise Records. All opinions offered by panelists or guests of the Hipsters United podcast are their own and do not represent the opinions of the Smashing Pumpkins. All audio during the show is licensed for non-profit use per the terms and conditions on the Live Music Archive at archive.org. Intro music is from the Machina 2 album released for free download on the internet by the Smashing Pumpkins in September of 2000.